I think my life has a lot more purpose. I think I wake up now thinking about the 41 million people that are going to go to bed hungry tonight if I don't figure out how to get more food to them. And I think when you're living your life with purpose, it is a much happier feeling than going to a job that you're doing because you need to pay your bills.
Welcome to the Business for Good podcast, a show where we spotlight companies making money by making the world a better place. I'm your host, Paul Shapiro, and if you share a passion for using commerce to solve many of the world's most pressing problems, then this is the show for you. Welcome to the 25th episode of the Business for Good podcast. I cannot believe we're already at the silver marker for this show, and I'm grateful to you for listening to the podcast and sharing it with friends when you find it useful. I've learned a lot from these first 25 episodes, and after talking with so many cool entrepreneurs and business titans alike, I'm frankly more persuaded today than ever before that in order to fix many of the world's most pressing problems, we need creative business solutions that can make doing the right thing the actually profitable thing at the same time. If you agree to celebrate this 25th episode marker, please consider doing me a favor. Leave the show a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Even one sentence is helpful and lets people know the show is worth checking out. Who knows? Maybe someone will see the podcast because of your review and will be inspired to start his or her own company to make the world a better place. I doubt they'll give you any equity in their unicorn company, but know that we'll all be grateful to you for it. Now, on to this episode, which is one that's really close to my heart. Because as someone who, for better or worse, talks with a lot of homeless people and has even caused a small amount of domestic disharmony by inviting some to my house, I've always thought of helping the homeless as really more like an act of charity, not a potentially lucrative business model. Well, maybe if more people thought of it as a business opportunity, the homeless might actually be a lot better off. Now, for a lot of people, when they walk by someone who's homeless, their inclination may be to look the other way. But one day for Jasmine Crowe, she not only didn't look the other way, she saw a profitable business opportunity in helping connect the hungry with perfectly good food that the rest of us are throwing away. Sound like a pipe dream? Well, today, for many major food users, including the NFL, the Atlanta airport, and Netflix, they pay Jasmine's startup that she founded to take their unsold food and deliver it to the hungry. And it turns out that thanks to federal tax law, it's profitable not only for Jasmine's company, but for those corporations paying to have their unwanted food go to the hungry too. So far, Jasmine's company, Goodr, that's Goodr, has diverted more than 2 million pounds of food from landfills and into the stomachs of the homeless, all profitably. In this episode, we talk with Jasmine about her business model and how it's helping the homeless while protecting the planet at the same time. So sit back or do whatever you do while listening to podcasts and prepare to be inspired by Jasmine Crowe. Jasmine Crowe, welcome to the Business for Good podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you on. I have watched your TEDx talk. I have seen other videos of you. I even saw you on the NBC National Nightly News. So it's nice to have a minor celebrity amongst us on the show today.
Minor, definitely minor. I'll take that.
Very cool. So let's just get right down to it. You're the CEO of Goodr, but the idea of starting a company was not always on your mind. So let me just go back to this time when, you're walking down the street or maybe you're driving and you see homeless people. Now, a lot of times people see homeless people, they simply pass by. Maybe they try to avoid making eye contact, or if they're particularly generous, maybe they'll offer some food or say hello or something. But several years ago, you had a different experience and a different response. Tell me about it.
Absolutely. Driving through downtown Atlanta, just drove past hundreds of people that were homeless. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, wow, I want to do something. Didn't have a lot of money. Was trying to figure out what could I do. And I thought maybe the power of food would be a good way to get in front of people and just resource and network and see how I could help them. And so I went home and, posted on Facebook, I'm going to make a dinner for people that are experiencing homelessness. If you guys want to come out and volunteer with me. And it grew. I started doing that every 2 weeks and was feeding upwards of 500 people. So it got to be a massive undertaking. But even though it was a big job, it still gave me the greatest joy. I was still working full time. So this wasn't my full time position. This was literally just my role of service in the community.
What were you doing at the time for a job?
Yeah, so I was still working in the social impact space in the nonprofit realm, working with a lot of celebrities in and out of the Atlanta area, and actually helping them start their nonprofits, fund their nonprofits, create their programming, run all of their programming, training their board. So I was in that space, but it just wasn't my own working, if you will. So this it was a different thing for me. But yeah, that day, I always say that was October of 2013. It really was a paramount life-changing day for me because it got me on the path to what would start Goodr.
You know, the idea of feeding the homeless is something that, of course, many people might think about. Maybe they'll say, do I have an extra bar in my pocket that I could give away? You, though, decided that you're going to feed 500 homeless people. I mean, what was your background that would lead you to think about doing something like that?
I didn't really have a background if I would. I think it was just kind of, there were that many people to feed. So it wasn't I'm going to feed this many homeless people. It was like, hey, I'm going to go out there. I know I need a lot of food because there's a lot of people. And I started to make more food as we started running out. And so the first 2 or 3 weeks, we would run out of everything. And I was like, okay, there's about 300 people. And I would count plates. So that's how I knew how many people we were feeding, as I would count plates or count boxes. And so I just knew I had to start making more and more food. I started to see peaks. In the summer, high homeless population in Atlanta specifically, where I'd see upwards of that 500 people, and that would kind of go down in the winter. So I just started to understand the flows, if you will, and wanted to make sure I was providing food to as many people as possible.
And so when you're feeding all of these hundreds of people, I'm going to ask you a bit of a trick question. Tell me about all of the restaurants and grocery stores that were donating the food to you for this.
Yeah, nobody.
So why? So you're paying for all of this yourself, or other people are helping you, or what?
Yeah, people are giving me donations. So I'm getting donations from people. I'm paying for a lot of food on my own. And then I'm asking my volunteers to pitch in. So my volunteers would pitch in by doing things like bringing the plates or bringing the silverware. That would be kind of their role.
Now, okay, so you are now bi-weekly feeding hundreds of homeless people at a time. At what point did you think to myself, there is a profitable business to be had here by feeding the homeless?
Yeah, it all started. I started what was called the Sunday Soul pop-up restaurant. So originally I was feeding more of a buffet style, and people would be standing in lines sometimes for hours. And I just thought to myself one day, I'm not even going to wait at a restaurant if the wait is longer than 30 minutes. I'll go someplace else if I can't get a reservation. And so here I was, people were waiting sometimes an hour or two just to eat. And it just didn't feel right to me. I wanted people to be able to dine, but also with dignity. And so I created what was called the Sunday Soul pop-up restaurant. And I started renting tables and chairs and linens. And I was getting Trader Joe's to donate flowers. And I was printing off these menus and literally letting people sit down, letting volunteers kind of serve them almost as if they were a waitress. We had a kitchen staff. Like, that's how it kind of grew into being a real restaurant. And a video went viral of that restaurant on Facebook. And I woke up one morning, thousands of views, all these friend request messages. And I'm reading through the comments one night, and one of the reoccurring questions that people kept on saying was, this is so amazing. Who donates the food? And I'm thinking, nobody. Like, I'm couponing, I'm price matching. I'm, up until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning cooking everything. And it was like, why aren't people donating the food? It was just like a big aha moment for me. And that's when I started researching what happens with this food and got really upset. And that's when I thought, okay, there's a profitable business here, but there's also a way that I could do well by doing good.
Now, did you have any business background or anything that would lead you to think, hey, I'm the one to start a company to try to solve this problem?
Definitely had background in that social impact space for certain. And then also the experience that I had by the time I saw the need. This was 3 years later. I had already been feeding people for 3 years. So I started in October of 2013. This was around February 2016 when I started thinking of this idea, and did believe I was the person to solve it just because of the connections that I had with people that were experiencing the problem.
So you have become somewhat famous for saying that hunger is not a question of scarcity, it's a question of logistics. And that is why you decided to found this company, Goodr, which is Goodr, in 2017. So tell us about the founding. What was the business model that you were envisioning? Did you get outside funding to help launch this?
Yeah, when I first launched Goodr, absolutely not. I wish I had had outside funding. I just didn't have the resources. It's extremely hard for women, especially women of color, to raise funding early on. So when I first started, it was a completely bootstrapped. I saw ourselves as a waste management company, and it really came under the guise, Paul, that people are already paying to throw the food away. And so that was like the big aha moment for me when I was doing the research and asking these businesses, well, what do you guys do with your excess food at the end of the night? Do you guys ever give it away? And they would say, oh, no, there's liability reasons. And I would research those and kind of figured out how I could come across that. But they ultimately were telling me they were throwing it away. And what I knew for sure is they were paying to throw the food away. And so I thought the business model would be that we would be a food waste management company. And so they could pay us, but instead of that food going to landfill, we would get it to people. And that became kind of the differentiating fact for us.
So tell us how the business works. So first, let me just say, so basically you are not distributing this surplus food to people yourself. You're distributing it to nonprofit organizations, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So the company pays you to take their surplus food and then you give it to the nonprofit organizations. And then do you get a tax write-off? Does the company who donated it to you get a tax write-off?
Yeah, the company who donates it receives a tax write-off, but they receive so much more than that. So we also give them a lot of data and analytics around the things that are getting donated. And that's important for a business to know. Are they consistently on it every single Tuesday night? Are they wasting the same product more so than they should be? And being able to say, hey, we are wasting quite often blueberry muffins. Now they can make better production decisions and make sure that they're not spending an exorbitant amount of money that they don't need to on food costs. Anything that does get donated, they're able to claim about 50% of the value of that item at the time of donation. So they're saving money there. They're getting data analytics. They're reducing their overall waste bill that they would spend with another waste provider because we're taking everything that's edible that shouldn't be in landfill in the first place out of that actual bulk. And then they're empowering their local communities. I think that's a huge win there. And what we also do is we give them a lot of sustainability data as well. So we can tell our clients for every pound of food we keep out of landfill, what does that mean for gallons of water saved? What does that mean for trees planted? All of that, CO2 emissions that they're preventing. So it helps them from a sustainability standpoint as well.
That's really cool. I'd love to talk more about that sustainability aspect in a little bit. But first, I just want to understand this business model a little bit more. So Goodr is a technology company, right? I mean, it's not just like you have somebody who says, hey, I've got excess food, and then you decide you're going to swing by in your own station wagon and pick this up.
Yeah.
So tell us what it is that you have actually invented with the company and how you solve these problems.
I would look at Goodr as like a reverse, DoorDash, Uber Eats, Postmates.
Okay.
We essentially inventory everything it is that a business sells. And so we've created a very easy user experience that at the end of the night, if they're like a retail company, they can scan items out. If they're a restaurant, they're literally clicking on the menu items, either on the point of sale at their registers or via a mobile app or via our portal online. And they're letting us know how many of those items that they have. Then they push request pickup. We leverage a network of third-party logistics providers. And in some cases, our own do-gooders with their own vehicles or our vehicles go pick up that food and it gets delivered to a nonprofit, like within a 3 to 5 mile radius of where that food is being donated from. We do that for two reasons, Paul. We want to make sure that the food is traveling safely and efficiently, but also it allows that client to really generate social change right in their own backyard. And then on the back end, they have this portal that they're able to access all of that data I told you about, the items that they're wasting the most of, the top 5 items. They can see which nonprofits they're supporting, a heat map of the city and the areas where the food is going to, the kind of causes that they're supporting. They have a sustainability report that they're able to access and download at any time as well. So the two big things that we've built essentially are a front-facing app that takes all of the donation information, and then a back-end portal that allows someone at a corporate office, let's use Whole Foods as an example, that would be able to look at what Whole Foods are doing across the country as it relates to food diversion. And they can break it down by city, by state, and drill into just one store, see what's being donated, who is it going to.
Oh, that's really cool. And this is all powered by blockchain, right?
It is. And so the biggest thing with our use of blockchain, when I first was starting Goodr and doing the research on that, a lot of it was how it was being used in the mortgage industry. But I thought the best thing for me was the idea of transparency and being able to show the business a full chain of custody on what is actually happening with this food from the time that they're requesting it for pickup to the time we recover it, to the time it gets donated. So we have this full chain of custody, plus it's secure. We have a secure ledger because we're dealing with financial data as it relates to tax savings. And so if the IRS ever comes to one of our clients and says, hey, how is it that you guys are writing off $2 million in food donations? Now we have a report that we can literally pull up, and it's secure. It can't be fudged. It doesn't allow the customer to go back in and say, hey, that day that I donated 100 pizzas, add an additional 0 onto that so that I can get a bigger tax deduction, because all of that has to now be backed. It's backed in blockchain. It has to be verified.
Tell us about some of your customers. You keep mentioning you have these customers. Are we talking about small mom and pop shops, or are we talking about something bigger?
A little bigger. I mean, right now, I definitely have aspirations to start getting into smaller businesses, especially with our SaaS portal, where they could just manage their waste. But currently, right now, our customers are pretty large. So we typically are dealing with airports, convention centers. Those are kind of our big kind of targets right now. But we work with Papa John's, Chick-fil-A. So we have some quick service franchise restaurants in there as well. Our goal is to get a lot of food in one location. So we typically like to work with, businesses, shopping malls, convention centers, airports, wherever you could think of where we can get the most food in one location and get it to the most people. We've been fortunate also to work with Netflix. So we do a lot of our services on their movie and TV sets, which I can tell you have a lot of really good food that we're getting to people in food.
Most people would be excited about seeing the celebrities who are on these shows. You're excited about how much food is there.
I'm excited about the food, but if you think about the celebrities, they're eating good. So when you talk about a Netflix, Ozark, for example, is one of our sets in Atlanta. Jason Bateman, they're eating good food, and so we're getting that food and getting it to people in need, and it means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the cast too. I think they love it. They love to see Goodr coming. It's so exciting to them to know that nothing from their set is ever going to waste. It's a really good feeling there. And we also had a chance to work with the NFL. We were an official partner with them for Super Bowl 53 on making sure that none of their food went to waste either.
So if you're working with the NFL and Chick-fil-A and major airports like the Atlanta airport and Netflix, it sounds like you have, and these are all paying you to do this. You have a pretty, in the last 2 years, you must have grown your business pretty substantially. So tell us about that. How many folks are now working at Goodr? Is it yet a profitable business, or are you reliant on outside funding? What's the status of the company now?
So we've raised a little bit of funding, very small. We've raised just $1 million. So not a huge amount of capital has kind of come in. We're still a very small but mighty team. So we are at 7 full-time employees and about 15 or so part-time do-gooders that are working with us. Our goal is to really expand. We're making money. We're not fully profitable yet, but we still have a long way to go. And we're getting to that point. I think we're getting to a tipping point, which I'm really excited about, where this becomes the normal thing to do and not this new thing to do. And so we're just making sure that our business is ready for this growth. We're seeing a lot of positive things that are taking place in other countries. For example, France, businesses are now fined about $4,500 for each infraction when they don't donate food to somebody in need. And so that's a good feeling for us to see that this is happening. And so we're getting to this better point.
That's great. Yeah, it's a really innovative idea in order to show people that feeding the homeless is not merely an act of charity, that there's a profitable business here to take the waste of the rest of society and say, hey, there's nothing wrong with this food, that we can actually use this rather than putting it in landfills. We can put it in people's stomachs who need it.
Exactly.
So let's just say, Jasmine, that I am a restaurant owner or a food service company, and I'm concerned. I have all this food I'm throwing away, but at the same time, I don't want to get sued if somebody gets sick for eating my food. What's to stop that from happening to me?
So we provide a $15 million liability insurance policy to all of our clients and essentially say to them, once Goodr recovers this food, we'll take on that liability. Beyond that, though, Paul, since 1996, President Bill Clinton signed what was called the Good Samaritan Act. And it really states in very clear writing that no business that's donating food in good faith can be held liable. And so we also want to educate our clients about that. There's been no lawsuits since that law has went in place for any businesses that have been sued for food that was donated. And then we also have agreements in place with everybody that receives food from Goodr as well. So they sign hold harmless agreements, and they know that they can't sell the food, so they can't resell it. They also can't barter. They can't make someone work for the food in exchange. And then they also can't hold Goodr or any of our clients liable. So those are kind of the high level things that we're taking precaution on, but then also knowing that in some cities, they're actually mandating that there are organics recycling programs that these businesses need to participate in.
Okay, that's really interesting. So Congress acted on this back in the 90s to inoculate people from getting sued for giving food away. I think that Congress has also taken some more recent action on this that's been beneficial for your company too, right? With the PATH Act?
That's correct.
So what is the PATH Act?
The PATH Act allows, and that's the biggest thing, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the EPA, they've set this goal that they want to cut food waste in half by 2030. We're really behind as a country. The United States is behind. But what they did is they tried to incentivize businesses by saying, hey, you can write off up to 30% of your annual income in food donations. So they're actually encouraging businesses to do this. And so that's what the PATH Act essentially does. It now allows the business to write off not so much how many pounds of food they're donating, but item by item, because, Paul, there's a big difference if you're donating strawberries and you're donating lobster. And so by being able to take a tax deduction off of that actual item is important, but it requires the tracking. And that's what our platform does. It has all of the tracking of what actually is being donated item by item.
So in addition to the tax deduction that they are going to get by giving this food away, there is now some additional incentive through the PATH Act to take up to 30% as a write-off.
Exactly. And then they can roll it over. And it's based off of how that company is formed. So LLCs receive the greatest benefit, being able to write off up to 30%. S Corps and C Corps are going to be able to write off up to 15%. But in both cases, they can roll it over. So if they reach that maximum, and it's 15% of their income or 30% of their income, and if they reach that maximum, they can roll it over for up to 5 years.
Wow. So they're paying you, but are they making more money than they are paying, do you think? Are they saving more money than they're paying you?
I think in many cases, they're going to see a 5X return. So essentially like a pickup for Goodr on a small end, maybe, let's say, $30. And let's just say this is from one of our quick service restaurants, right? Within that pickup, Paul, they're going to usually have anywhere from $150 to $300 worth of tax savings within that one pickup.
So just so I'm clear about what you're saying, the fee that Goodr charges would be, let's say, $30. And in that case, you think they get 5 times the tax savings of that payment?
Yeah, I know they do. Wow. Yeah, we always see that. Sometimes it's 10 times. I mean, with our airports and convention centers, you see a lot more tax savings because the food it costs more. It's the fair market value. So, airports and convention centers, the markups are really high. The food is expensive. Yeah, and so they're able to write off a lot more.
So let me just ask you then, why not raise your prices? If they're getting 5 to 10x return on this payment, why not charge 60 or 100 if they're getting that?
It really all depends on who the customer is. What we see with quick service and fast food restaurants is their food isn't really expensive, right? So they're not donating a $20, $30 chicken breast, whereas like a convention center is, they may be donating a $5 sandwich that's going to give them a $2.50, tax break. We're looking at, doing different things to raise those prices, certainly. But we're really fair and our margins are still really good, even with what we're charging. And we want to have more adaptation of our service than turning people away because our need is high. We have so many people on that list that are looking for food that we haven't even been able to serve yet in cities and states that we're not even in yet. We have so many requests. Why
do you think that is, Jasmine? Why do you think that there are so many people who are hungry?
I mean, a lot lot of it is just poverty. A lot of people just really aren't making the money to make ends meet. When you really think about it, Paul, there's a big critical decision that a lot of people make. And I spoke about this in my TED Talk, and I talk about it all the time, is I have to, at the end of the month, when I'm paying all my bills, I have this little bit of money left and I still have a few more bills left, but then I also need food. Now I have to make a critical decision. Am I going to pay for my power bill, or am I going to pay for food? And what people think is I can get by without a meal, or I can get by without this. And so oftentimes food is the first thing to go.
Wow. All right. So you had alluded earlier to there being environmental benefits to doing this too. Tell us briefly, what are the environmental benefits of that food getting eaten rather than getting thrown away?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, you want to talk about climate change. You're hearing all about it, Paul. You're seeing it on the news. It is real and it is happening. Food waste is one of the leading contributors to global climate change, and we cannot continue to ignore that. As food sits in landfills, it gradually rots. And what it does is it produces methane gas, which is extremely harmful on the environment. So while we take that food out of landfill, what we're doing is we're reducing the CO2 emissions that are getting into the environment. And that's needed. Food waste has doubled. It's increased 50% since the 1970s. So this is a lot. I mean, we're in our population is only growing. So we're wasting more and more food. The time to stop it is definitely now.
Okay, so let me just ask you then, as we are getting ready to round up, you have created this business. It went from just a mere concept to now having 7 full-time and over a dozen part-time folks. You have inked deals with some of the biggest names in food and in really business. So what's the impact that the company has? I'm sure that you are measuring the number of meals, the number of pounds, like to date. Right now we're recording this at the very end of August 2019. How much impact have you had?
We've had some great impact. We're approaching 2 million pounds. We believe we're going to get there by the end of the year. And that's, provided over 1.7 million meals if we reach that number. And then that's how much we've kept out of landfill. So that's amazing, right? So those are almost 2 million pounds of food that could have been sitting in landfill, but instead we got to somebody in need.
Wow, that is a huge impact for such a small team to have, for sure, and a good example of the power that a small business can have to actually help make a real difference in the world. Jasmine, you have become, as I said at the beginning, somewhat of a celebrity for this work. You were not only profiled on NBC's nightly national news, but I saw that Oprah Winfrey even did a profile video on you, right?
Yeah,
on Super Soul
great.
Sunday. Wow, that is pretty cool. Did you get to meet Oprah?
Not yet. That's coming.
That's coming.
I believe
okay.
I'm going to speak that into existence.
Okay. Well, I'm sure she's an avid listener of this podcast, so hopefully she's hearing you, and we'll reach out to you soon. But how has your life changed? I mean, you have gone from starting a company that had nothing to now being featured on national news segments. How's your life changed as a result of it?
I mean, it's changed in ways that I would have never imagined. I always talk about the fact that I've been in rooms. I just yesterday spoke at the UN summit. Would have never thought I would have ever spoke in front of United Nations about the work that I'm doing with Goodr. But I think my life has a lot more purpose. I think I wake up now thinking about the 41 million people that are going to go to bed hungry tonight if I don't figure out how to get more food to them. And I think when you're living your life with purpose, it is a much happier feeling than going to a job that you're doing because you need to pay your bills. And so that's the greatest thing that's happened to me over the last almost 3 years is I just wake up every day really excited to do this work.
Very nice. If there are people out there who want to either learn more about what you're doing or who are interested in maybe starting their own company to tackle the food waste and hunger problems, or who are just thinking about becoming an entrepreneur themselves, what resources, Jasmine, would you recommend to them?
Definitely, I would first encourage them to connect with us. We're definitely looking to license our technology, grow and expand into other markets. So we're always looking for those partners and kind of leaders in those roles. So visit us online at Goodr.co first and foremost. You can follow us online at Good Orco on Facebook and Instagram, and the Good Orco on Twitter, and connect with me, Jasmine Crowe, on everything. The biggest thing I would tell people is to read, listen to podcasts, educate yourself. Having a startup is extremely different than anything you can ever think of, especially if you get into the realm of venture capital. And so what you want to do is just make sure that you are educated. And that's what I do. every single day I'm trying to read. I'm trying to read a book a week, and I'm listening to podcasts, and I'm reading blogs, and I'm making sure that I'm the most educated person about this subject. And I think that's what you got to do.
A book a week is certainly an ambitious goal. Are there any specific books that you found particularly helpful for you?
Yeah, I think Good to Great is a great one. I think that's just one of those ones I'll look up quite often. I'm recently reading right now The Blue Ocean Strategy, which I think is really a great book, because what it shows is that there is enough room for everybody to win. There's enough business market share for everybody. That's why there is a McDonald's, a Wendy's, a Burger King. It's because there's enough for everyone. So there are some really good books out there that have been helpful for me. Those are the two that kind of come up on the top of my head.
All right. And finally, Jasmine, there's obviously a lot that I can imagine you have to be grateful for, but what comes to the top of your mind when you're thinking about what it is that you, Jasmine Crowe, are grateful for?
Definitely top of my mind is I'm happy that I get to feed people. I'm extremely grateful for that. I could be in a grocery store and someone can come up to me and say, hey, you may not remember me, but you used to feed me and my son when we were living on Peachtree and Pine. And I used to be so excited to see you come. That to me, I know at the end of my life, I'll really get to say, like, people were hungry and I fed them. And that gives me a lot of joy.
What a great way to end the interview, Jasmine. I really appreciate what you're doing. I admire what you're doing, and I am wishing you all the best to grow Goodr into a national and even an international phenomenon.
No, I really appreciate it, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. We hope you found use in this episode. If so, don't keep it to yourself. Please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. And as always, we hope you will be in the business of doing good.